I remember being 4 years old, running away from my mom, going to the ice cream aisle in the supermarket. So running away from her and literally opening up boxes of different ice creams and eating them. And I remember sitting in the aisle, opening them up, taking the candies and stickers that they throw in there out as I opened up ice cream, tasted one after the other. So that's what it was like being, a 4-year-old. And then, I remember being 8 years old and, having, as a male, having, breasts, really really excessive fat. And, I didn't notice it. It was the first time I really remember feeling obese. But the 4-year-old was the first time I remember feeling ashamed of my appetite. And then when I was 8, I was the reindeer in the school play, running in place. And when they showed us the playback on a snow day of me, in the auditorium during lunch or whatever, they showed back the play that we did on the big screen. I remember seeing my fat basically jiggle around on this camera and everybody laughing all at once. And I remember that memory vividly. And it wasn't the kids laughing that got me. It was the lunch lady. And I remember the red cheeks she had and her blonde hair. And, she had short blonde hair. It was the lunch lady who was laughing and was like, oh gosh, that's not cool, So yeah, that's what it was like. And, I battled with it. My whole family battled with it. I remember being 13, weighing over 200 pounds and, my older brother weighing well over 300 pounds at the time. And both parents struggled with obesity and, went to the doctor and the doctor was like, you're fat and you're going to be fat just like your family. And that was the moment, the critical moment. I remember, like, that was the where the arc, changed and the trajectory changed, because I was like, who the F is this guy to make me sit in the waiting room for 2 hours to just tell me to go lose weight? I'll show him. I won't eat. So I didn't eat for a month after that because I was like, basically F Dr. Adis, I laugh about it now, but people can get that much worse than I did. And then I fell into sort of veganism. I ate carrots and lettuce and Diet Coke for a number of years just to try to keep the weight off, but it didn't work. I wanted to be a kid. I wanted to run. I wanted to thrive. And just my body was calling for food. And so I lost weight at 13 as an anorexic kid and put it all back on and then some. And it was just constant battle of trying to lose weight and then regaining, ultimately college, gained 20 pounds, med school, gained 40 pounds, residency, gained another 40 pounds. And here you are, fast forward, you're 30 years old and you're 350 pounds and you have prediabetes, you have fatty liver, sleep apnea, hypertension, every part of your body hurts. Your mental health is not where it should be. You're just really a shell of yourself. And I trained in a great program, an internal medicine program, a Yale affiliated program. I was chief resident. It wasn't like I didn't have access to the most brilliant minds, nurses, doctors, dietitians, psychologists. They would ask me, are you counting your calories? And I'm like, yeah, I'm counting them, but I'm ravenous, and I don't think you understand, I would go through boxes of Kashi cereal. I would go, whole wheat bread. I don't only get whole wheat. And, it's funny. My wife was commenting, because I asked her recently, like, do you remember what it was like, 12 years ago before we started? Or, and she said, yeah, I remember we'd go to a restaurant. I would get the barbecue. You'd get a salad. Like, that was what I ordered. Every time I went out, I got a salad, right? I was just thinking in the way they wanted me to, which is, quote unquote, have more grains, cut your calories, eat plants. And it got me absolutely nowhere. It got me to just a worse mental place, a worse physical place, and on my board exam, I'm in internal medicine. I was the chief resident, which is such an honor, and I'm scoring, ridiculously highly, but I lacked insight. And nobody, not even the most brilliant person, could pass on insight to me because they didn't know what was going on. They didn't understand what my issue was. They viewed obesity as a budgeting issue, and I had a budgeting problem. And this is the exact wrong way to approach obesity. The obesity model can best be explained by the addiction paradigm, right? It is 100% why smart people or people of any kind maintain a behavior despite ill health. There's only one way to explain this in a systematic way, and that's the addiction model. And that addiction model really hit me. I'm known as the low carb MD doctor because of a very successful podcast with my partner in crime, Dr. Brian Lenskis. But I wasn't a low carb. I had never had a steak. I never cooked a steak 10 years ago. Right? I was not I had no skin in the game. In fact, if anything, I leaned towards veganism, as I'd had, used that approach in a time where I had a very poor relationship to food. Right. And I had, stuck to the mantras of the, eat less, move more, have more plant paradigm. So if anything, I had no inclination to low carb. The only reason why I adopted a low carb diet was because my wife challenged me. She said she was concerned for my health, and she said, we need to change. I'm worried that you're not going to be there. When that really hit me, it wasn't just on a spiritual level that it hit me. It was also, she played my arrogance. She was like, look at how great of a doctor you are. You figured out this diagnosis. You figured out that diagnosis. You're a chief resident. You scored on the 90th percentile on your board exam. You can figure this out. And so I was like, you know what? She's right. And I went and I read the literature. I read it. I read everything. I read the textbooks, multiple textbooks on obesity, all the papers. I went and looked at the studies that powered the guidelines. The way that got me successful as a doc, I applied it to obesity. And I'm like, holy crap, this is completely backwards. Low carb always is better. Like if it was an antibiotic, I would have chose the low carb antibiotic because it always performs modestly better. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that stuff. This is the evidence. I'm going to go with the evidence. So I started with a low carb diet, and quickly I realized when I had a patient, and this is like the second paradigm shift for me, The first was my wife challenging me and going back to literature, but the second paradigm shift happened quickly as I was losing weight. I had a patient come to my clinic and who had alcoholism, and I started asking him the CAGE questionnaire, CAGE, Cutting Agitated Guilty Eye Opener. It's a validated survey for alcoholism and alcohol dependence. And in my mind, as I was asking it in him, it's a way to bring out this problem in a safe way and screen for it as a clinician, right? And I wanted my patient to consider this as a possibility for him. So I was screening him, but at the same time, I'm screening myself. And this is 9 years ago. Do you want to cut down? And I'm like, gosh, I want to cut down, not on alcohol, but on food and processed food, and sugary, sweet, carby food, right? And then, geez, I'm like, do you get agitated when people tell you to cut down? Well, I'm like, gosh, my wife has asked me not to eat that. And even though I was 350 pounds and I didn't want to eat it, I'd be upset, right? Why? Because my emotions are, the substance manipulates your emotional response to maintain a behavior, right? So you get agitated instead of feeling gratitude, right? If my wife tells me you should cut that down, I should be like, oh my God, you're so helpful. I want to lose weight. I want to be healthy, right? I should respond with gratitude, but the addiction manipulates your emotions. And so you feel annoyed and agitated and angry and stubborn and oppositionally defiant. So that question, I was like, wait a second, I get agitated. So now I'm 2 for 2 here on the screen that I'm doing for alcoholism to help a patient, but I'm 2 for 2. And then the next question is, do you feel guilty or shameful? Now, what does that mean? Guilty or shameful? Of course I did, right? I felt intense guilt and shame since age of 4. And that means that your emotions betray you so frequently, and you have this intellectual desire to be healthy and change and stop a behavior, but you're not. Right now that you have psychological distress, and that's why you feel guilt and shame. And there I am with my 3rd out of 4. I'm trying to help him, and I am simultaneously discovering, wait a second, there's something wrong here. And then the last one is, the question is eye opener. In alcohol, it's drinking at an earlier and earlier time. But with food, it's a little bit different. It's feeling so compelled to eat that, you maybe you hide and sneak wrappers because you're afraid of the response, or you don't eat in front of others and then binge eat alone, or you eat before an event so that nobody will comment on how much you're eating there, or you'll do good all day and then lose control late at night, sneak food, hide food, etc. So all of this is sort of compulsive eating behavior that's affecting your relationships in your life. And I'm like, gosh, now I'm 4 to 4. And if this was alcohol, it's, this is a done deal. I have a dependence and I have to fix it. Right. So that was my second wake up call, as early in my career, about 9 years ago or 8 years ago, a year into my low carb lifestyle, I discovered the truth, which is my relationship to food was really wrong. And the root cause of my suffering going back to age 4, right? Going back to age 4, something that I was programmed with, right? I'm programmed to seek out food voraciously, right? And now I understand this all, and I'm left to reconcile it. But it's hard to reconcile when you've, blamed yourself for your obesity your entire life, and you felt like you should have just done better, like you've done everything else in your life. Just that one thing you couldn't figure out, food. Does that make sense? Does that narrative make sense? Are you to blame? Somebody who has discipline and willpower in other areas? Are you to blame? When you didn't really know? Are you to blame? Am I the reason why I feel agitated and annoyed when somebody tells me not to eat something? No, I don't choose that. I didn't choose that. I didn't choose to feel guilty and shame. This is just how I felt. This is how my mind was working. So this concept of lifelong self-blame, lifelong, feeling inadequate, lifelong helplessness, right? It's like gone. It's unnecessary. In fact, not only is it unnecessary, it's part of the addiction cycle. It needs to disappear. If you feel bad about yourself, what's the easiest way to feel better? You eat food. If you're upset at yourself because you gave in, what's the first thing you do? You need to feel good, right? And how do you feel good? You go back to the substance that's captivated you, right? So that was the second liberating movement. I know it's a long-winded answer, but the first liberation I was understanding the nutritional dogma, and the second liberation was an inward. First the outward liberation, like understanding the lies that our entire world is told, because they're unable to really face food addiction, right, as a systematic problem. And then the internal lies I told to myself as a lifelong experiencer of this insatiable drive to keep eating. I was in such desperate need of mentorship, and it didn't exist. I mean, right. The only areas that it may have existed, think about it. There was Weight Watchers. That was it. Right? There was no mentorship with regards to lifelong battles with food. There was dietitians who said, eat more grains. So I had no way to express my opposition and my rebellion other than just try to figure it out. And that's no longer necessary.
Thank goodness.
That's obsolete. Yeah. When we're talking about, I think, a decided nutrition paradigm, I shouldn't. I'm also not anti-vegan, right? So I think when we're talking about diet, there's so many issues at play, right? There's, emotions and nostalgia. There is religion, and there is moral and ethical considerations, and there is, certainly culture, and then there's nutrition, and then there's metabolic health, and then there's obesity, right? So, and each of these has a different component. The nutritional needs of somebody with osteopenia and mental health issues are different than somebody who has a strong moral proclivity to not eating animals, right? So the same substance can be harmful, psychologically to one person and nutritionally helpful to another person. So I think I appreciate the fact that you grounded me in not being and giving me the airspace to sort of clarify. I'm not anti-vegan in any way. I think there is a strong sort of a push to in terms of the nutritional authorities and the medical authorities to promote a plant-based sort of paradigm that's grounded in several tenets and several ideas, one of which is the budgeting model to obesity, which is fundamentally flawed. Two is the potential environmental implications of plant-based eating. And the third is moral and religious grounds. And I think each of those, the most valid of all those, in my opinion, is that moral and religious grounds and cultural sort of proclivities. If you have a fundamental, belief system, you should follow that above all else. Nobody should tell you what to do. So yeah, 100% not vegan bashing, if that's how it came off. You can do well eating plants. There are people who can do well eating plants, and there's people who don't do well eating plants. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily the salads in my case, or the green leafies in my case. I think it was the grains for me. And the addictive nature of sugar and refined carbohydrate. So I don't think that same quality exists in, arugula, right? So I think it's completely individual and not, there's one saying that one of my mentors said, everybody can't eat everything. Like imagine telling somebody with a peanut allergy that, you should eat peanuts, right? Imagine telling somebody with a Lone Star tick bite, an alpha-GAN syndrome, which is an allergic response to meat, that they should eat more meat. I think, the diet is tricky, but I appreciate you grounding the conversation. There's no in between the lines here. I have countless patients who are Asian, sub-Asian, who eat, who don't eat meat. They don't have red meat. They don't have any animals, right? And there are ways to be healthy in any paradigm you choose. At 4, the only shame I felt was feeling like I shouldn't have been opening these boxes in a store. It wasn't like, and certainly I don't remember my mom shaming me, right? But when it came to that particular incident, but I think this gets to the point of, what is an addiction, right? There's a strong biologic drive to have a substance, right? If you haven't done this, go do this. Go Google goats on a dam. Okay, just Google goats on a dam.
Goats
Not
on
right
a
now.
what?
On a dam. Okay, just Google it. You'll get a National Geographic documentary, and I think this highlights the story very well. It's about a very old dam, and these goats, this dam, which is literally like a very steep stone structure, hundreds of feet in the air, and these goats climb up the dam. The baby goats and the older goats, and if you look at these goats, you're in amazement. You're like, these goats must be crazy. What are they doing? Like, they just sit at the top of this dam. And you're like looking at them and you're like in awe because you're like, why aren't they aren't they scared of death? And if these goats and the baby goats and the mama goats and the papa goats were like on the floor and I chased them, I'm certain that these goats would run away. They would have an intact fear mechanism. But there's something suspending their fear, suspending their idea of consequence, suspending their fear of death, right? There's something that's doing that. And they're up there. They climb this, and their little kids climb it, and the little baby goats, these cute little goats, climb it. And they sit up there and they lick salt. That's why they're on the dam. They're licking salt. Now, should that baby goat be ashamed of itself for being driven to eat salt? Does the baby goat have a fundamental flaw in their brain that they are captivated by a substance that they have to eat? I don't think so. I don't think there's any shame required here. I don't think there's any need for personal accountability. You have this drive. There's no need for self-blame. It is what it is. You have a drive to breathe. Should I count my breaths in and out, make sure they match up? I have a drive to urinate. Should I make sure I drink as much as I pee out and make sure it quickly calibrated every millimeter of the way? No, right? We have these bodily functions that we just relegate and outsource to our sort of lizard brain. And what people with obesity and food addiction have to understand is you're trying to rip this drive out. And its emotional and psychological consequences, something that wants to go on automatic pilot since you were 4, you're trying to rip out and understand. Don't think you're not going to have problems doing this. You will. And don't think you're going to win in fighting it. You're not. I can hold in my pee. I can hold it in. Eventually, I will urinate, no matter where. At the end of the day, it's going somewhere. Now, I choose if it's going in my pants or in the toilet, right? I make that choice through several actions that lead up to that moment, right? And my understanding of how to manage my drive, right? But to believe that I can get rid of that drive is a fool's errand. To believe that I can just stop wanting to breathe is a fool's errand. You just must need to accept you have this drive. It's not going away. It needs reconciling. You cannot live without breathing. You cannot live without urinating. And you certainly cannot live without food, or for long, for each of them, right? So we were left with fighting or understanding this thing. So you can guide your appetite. You can guide it. You can't control it. I can't turn it off. I can't flick a switch and have it disappear. I can't look at that strawberry and say, I just want one. No, I want them all. I no longer accept it would be foolish for me to think otherwise. I have 40 years of experience knowing what to expect. Right? And so once you fully commit internally that you have this drive to eat and you're not getting rid of it, the next step becomes, what can I do to help it and manage it in the best possible way? And then that leads to the discussion that I think we were having when we started of harm reduction versus abstinence. But I think that's the fundamental first step, is acknowledging you're a food addict, screening for food addiction, acknowledging if you are a food addict, and not everybody is. My wife, we equally removed addictive substances, me and her, okay, for the past 10 years. She lost 15 pounds. I lost 150. So those food qualities have an impact on her. But those addictive properties have 10 times the effect on me. Now, this variability is genetics. You remove an addictive substance from my life, you'll see a 150-pound drop. When you remove an addictive substance from my wife's life, it's a 15-pound drop. The substance is the same. the effect on our brains is very similar, right? But the potency or the response is 10 times greater in me as reflected on weight. So everybody reacts a little bit differently. But I think fundamentally we need to accept we're dealing with something addictive. And that's step one. If you look at my obesity genes, I mean, I have all of the ones that make, if I was a grizzly bear, right, I would win. Right? If I was a grizzly bear and my family was grizzly bears, we would win.
Yes.
And so is generational trauma part of that? Certainly, in the same way that grizzly bears have generations of trauma, right? It's a tough world out there for the grizzly bears, right? And I think there are certainly emotional factors and mentorship factors. If somebody has overcome obesity or understands addiction, I think they're in a position to sort of guide a person with a little bit. So maybe a lack of insight in my immediate, family into how to manage this, and my, the healthcare community that I had access to. Yeah, and absolutely. If you look at childhood adversity, like the more negative stuff, the more negativity really in your life, and the less community you have, the more you will seek out any substance whatsoever, right? Because again, it comes down to biology. We seek out good and go away from bad, right? So you will go away from bad and seek out good. So at 4 years old, I was really good at going away from bad and seeking out good, right? And I think that there's an interplay between psychology, emotions, generational trauma, biology, genetics. It's all at play. Bottom line, it's leading you to eat, right? So you have to. So whichever one of those, now my wife, the genetic drive is probably less. But I'll tell you, when I stress her out or the kids stress her out, she's eating, right? So she has more of a sort of stress drive, let's say. So these, obesity is certainly multifactorial, and the drive to eat and hunger and perception of hunger is multifactorial. And the trick is getting a team that understands that, that truly understands how appetite works. How sleeplessness drives up ghrelin, makes you more hungry, makes you more impulsive, how stress, is the number one cause of weight regain in our practice, thousands of remote scales and watching people and guiding people. The number one predictor of weight regain is acute stress, acute and chronic stress, and lack of family support. Number one and number two predictors of weight regain. So all of these things sort of matter and add up. And, but the fundamental unifying thing, I think, concept is just acknowledging that sugar is addictive and food is addictive, right? It starts from there. You are driven to eat this thing. You are captivated to it against your choice, against your will. You can't unprogram that, right? Or you can't unprogram it easily. And what you do with that information, where you go from there, and how you seek out help and at what speed and when you're ready to change, these are all your personal agency, right? But I think fundamentally we need to just, as physicians, everybody in this seminar knows, right? That's why we're all here. But now we have to power the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, put out guidelines, working with Jen Unwin to get guidelines for food addiction and processed food addiction recognized. These will be the next step. We need, organizations like the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners needs, which is a not-for-profit. We need your help we need your support, financial support, right? You need to go find these medical teams out there that specialize in doing what we do in the UK. Jen Unwin's group is fantastic. There's so many others. I don't want to just stick to them, but in Canada, I know Vera Tarman is very focused on this. In the States, we are laser focused on this. So I think go out and those scientists that are contributing to the literature, go support them. The clinicians that are supporting the literature and getting them, go support them. The organizations, go support them. We all need that support because Coca-Cola is the enemy, right? For getting this recognized, and the Nabisco and General Mills, and we have fierce enemies and staunch dogma to fight against. So if anything I said resonated with you, go visit the SMHP, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. Go, come to our, we have free meetings. We have free meetings on our app. We have it's the Toward Health app. It is a free app. You have free meetings on getting started with carbohydrate reduction, free meetings on tips for fasting. We have a full curriculum on food addiction. I mean, I'm trying to make the healthcare system and the medical organizations that I wish I had. And I'm honored to be a part of the SMHP. I'm honored to be the medical director now with 4 health coaches, 2 doctors, a PA, an amazing team of 15 at our clinic, nationwide clinic. It's just an amazing honor to be a part of this community. I'll give you a quick example. I was like, okay, where is this drive coming from? Is it carb, sweet, both? I took a tub of plain Greek yogurt, fasted all day, ate it, was satiated. I added fruit, just a little bit of strawberries. And I was like, all right, let's see what happens. I ate 2 tubs of Greek yogurt and was still hungry. The next day I said, okay, let's try Splenda. Same thing. Ate 2 tubs of yogurt, still hungry. So I knew carbohydrates have some impact on me and sweetness has another impact on me. I am, when you're looking at an addiction, there's 2 major routes you can take. One is abstinence and harm reduction. I think the goal is always abstinence, living in a harmful substance-free life. And I think the reality for us mere mortals is harm reduction is just a lot easier to implement. So if you're coming off of soda and chocolate, that the reality is there's so much chocolate in our life, it's very hard not to get rid of all those triggers. And so there's so much soda everywhere in our lives, or whatever, frappuccinos now, that it's hard to get rid of these triggers. So having safe alternatives, much like a spare tire in a car, something you don't always use, but something that you turn to in case of emergency, I think is a really good approach, especially since attacks on your appetite are universal and should be expected. So I think abstinence is the goal. Harm reduction is a tool, is the proper way to sort of think about it. And then the degree with which you use harm reducers is entirely up to you. Like if I, early in my career, with this diet, I would eat several Quest bars and dark chocolate, I would go through a box a week, and that was a success for me. Now I don't remember the last bar I've eaten, maybe years, right? And there was times where it's more, there's times where it's less. I remember I was in a vacation and everybody was eating ice cream, and we're in this sort of convenience store, and there's people with me eating ice cream, and I was like, screw it, I'm going to eat a protein bar, and is that an ideal for me? Certainly not. But I have zero whim harm reducing, zero questions with it. It was the best I could do in that moment, and that was my decision, right? But when it comes to harm reduction, I think the key is making sure that doesn't keep you in the addiction loop. And as long as you're using a harm reducer in the way that it's intended, which is on the path to abstinence, that you're good. And the problem with that is there's nobody but you that can answer that question. Is this on the path to abstinence? So you really have to have a very clear internal vision, or a good, trustworthy, like mentor or coach or team that can help you sort of weed out, if you truly got 3 flat tires in a week, right? Like, the only person that would know is you. I mean, if you're driving over glass knowingly, right, and using those flat tires, well, now it's time to reevaluate. If you're on that 4th or 5th flat tire, even a mechanic's going to say, listen, Florence, what's going on here? I know we got the spare on, you did good, but what's up that you're using so many? Like, maybe you need a vision check. Maybe, maybe something's wrong. So I think, part of the privilege of sort of using harm reduction as a tool is having, the insight to actually check in, make sure that the use is appropriate, and make sure your overall progress is in line with your health goals. Because, that harm reduction, I think it's it's part of the healing cycle. And in my own career, the use of these things has gone up and down. Mainly now it's down, but I could not be here today without them. Yeah, usually stress, anxiety, emotions, sleeplessness, chronic pain. Those are like the major ones.
Those are the ones.
Those are mainly it. But, I'm happy you brought up nuts, because those are like a huge trigger food for me, right? When do I turn to them? When I want a snack. Right? Why do I want a snack? Because of all the things I just mentioned. Right?
Yep.
Right? Normally, I'm not hungry. I don't eat. Right? So nuts are problematic food. I'm not sure. I think also by nature they're problematic food, but not health-wise in general. It's just a very I've never seen a squirrel moderate its nut consumption. I've never seen that poor sloth in Ice Age is like killing itself over an acorn, right? I think you can tell I have young kids, but the thing is that I think there's something quite captivating about the nuts, and so just being mindful of that in and of itself, I think, is helpful. But you're absolutely right. Just pause and reevaluate. Pause and reevaluate, right? And you'll uncover more and more about your relationship to hunger. I know sleeplessness. The next day, I'm going to be hungry. I know that under stress, social stress particularly, I'm going to be hungry, right? And so you accommodate for those things, and you adapt, to try to mitigate, the consequences you're not happy with. My older brother lost 250 pounds, and
wow.
But then there was a war in the country he was in, and COVID. He went through some social situations that were very challenging, and he regained it all back. And now he's back to losing. He's down about 100 pounds. So I think, we're all struggling. We're all struggling, and our ability to win in terms of weight is largely predicated on our mindset and our mental health. So I think that those have become important. And it's funny. I think family. It's always a bit tricky. But yes, I think I have had an impact on my family. For the positive, and I think also knowing that, as a human, right, you're not looking for your family to be your healer, right? And really knowing that, right, they're looking for a brother, a son, and so being mindful of your role, I think, is important in situations like that. right? Like people choose me to be their healer. And so I take that choice sacredly. And not everybody chooses that. So
Fair.
I think as a healer, you have to accept that, but I know that they're listening and watching and seeing, and they're asking questions, and it's only a matter of time, with all of them, right? And when they choose to go down that road, all the resources are at their fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
I have to, I'm on the board of directors, volunteer position at the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. Go support them. We need the support. If you know somebody who wants to see the medical and health organization change, make a donation. And find people in the space, find the people who are publishing their results and the impact of their work, and support them. I've funded all of our research. We just submitted another paper of our 2-year results, and all of this is completely self-funded. I don't have any. I don't have anybody. There's nobody supporting this. Right? So we need your support. I know the same with Dr. Jen Unwin. We talk about this, and she's publishing her new results, and we need people to support us. Right? We can't, I'm a physician. I don't take sponsorship. I don't take, I don't accept any, speaking, money for speaking. I've never done that. I've spoken nationally, worldwide, and I turn down every, stipend, and I ask for a donation to be made instead of that stipend. I think if I want to talk about something, I should be on my own accord, influence free. And so find these people who are champions, because we need your support. I need your support. So if you're listening to this, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners needs your support. The Food Addiction Consortium that met, we need your support. So we need your support. So if you need help, we also need help. So let's scratch each other's backs. There's all sorts of committees we have, advocacy, right, research, outreach, conferences. So volunteer, it doesn't just have to be, even volunteers are always welcome.